For 11 years, Daniel Farrow repaired what Meridian Dynamics threw away. Every faulty pump housing his old employer quietly pulled from inventory. Every unit that failed pressure testing. Every part that would have ended someone's career if it had ever reached an inspector ended up in crates behind his shop. No paperwork, no press, just Daniel, his tools, and a son who grew up falling asleep to the sound of a socket wrench. He never made noise about it. He kept every record anyway. And when Meridian Dynamics finally came apart under the weight of what it had buried, the woman who ran it had nowhere left to go but his door. The town of Larkspur Hollow didn't ask much of the people who lived there, just steady work and the patience to know what was worth keeping. Farrow Machine and Repair sat at the end of Route 12, a low cinder block building with a rusted tin awning and a sign Daniel had painted himself the year he opened, never touched up since. He was up by 5:45 every morning, no alarm needed. He made coffee in the same dented percolator he'd used for a decade, then went down the hall to wake his son. Milo was 7, with a cowlick that never sat right and a stuffed fox named Gears that went everywhere. Daniel would sit on the edge of the bed and nudge him awake gently, and Milo would ask, half asleep, "Meridian trucks today?" The way kids ask questions they already know the answer to. Daniel would say probably, and that was usually true. He dropped Milo at his Aunt Carla's on the way to the shop. She was 61, lived 3 streets over, had never had kids of her own, and had quietly become something like a grandmother to Milo without either of them naming it. His bookkeeper, Renee Okafor, had been quietly tracking the batch codes on her own time for years, without ever discussing it with him directly. She just kept handing him folders. Third one from that same production run this year. She told him one morning, holding out a manila folder with photos and a highlighted printout. Daniel looked at it a long moment. "Put it with the others," he said, the way he always did. They both knew what the others were for, even if neither had said it out loud. The back room of Farrow Machine and Repair held 4 steel filing cabinets, painted the same shade of gray-blue as the break room at the Meridian Engineering plant where Daniel had worked for 9 years before all this. The room where, one Tuesday 8 years ago, he'd argued with a division manager named Preston Ainsley about a stress fracture pattern in the housing design for the company's flagship hydraulic line. Daniel had been a senior mechanical engineer then. The design was largely his. The wall thickness calculations, the seal geometry, the alloy blend that was supposed to hold under repeated pressure cycling. He'd spent 2 years on it, and his name had been on the internal design file when it went to production. Then his wife Naomi had died in a highway accident on a rainy October night. Milo was 6 months old. Daniel took leave, then more leave, and when he came back, the department had reorganized. Ainsley, then a rising deputy director, had quietly stripped Daniel's name from the design credit and handed it to a team he'd never led. By the time Daniel understood what had happened, he had no money for a lawyer and no will left to fight one. He opened the shop instead. So Daniel took the envelopes. He did the work. And every single time, he wrote everything down. The unit code, the batch number, the fracture location, the date, his own root cause analysis, and filed it away by a year in the gray-blue cabinets. He did it because he was not a man who threw away data, and because somewhere underneath the exhaustion of raising a boy alone and running a shop alone, he'd always believed, without quite saying so, that it would matter eventually. The story broke on a Tuesday morning in November. Renee came out of the office holding her phone like it might bite her. 210,000 units, she said. 11 documented failures. 3 serious. Daniel set down the wrench he was holding. He already knew which units. He'd been writing them down for 11 years. Inside Meridian's tower, the collapse wasn't slow. It never is, until it is. The recall triggered a federal review. The review surfaced internal emails. Within 72 hours, the stock had cratered, and the calls had stopped being the ordinary kind and started being the kind that meant lawyers. Vivian Castellane sat in her office at midnight reading a 2015 memo, signed for by Preston Ainsley, warning about the exact fracture pattern now driving the recall. It had never reached her desk. Her attorney, a sharp, economical woman named Odalise Reyes, told her flatly what she needed. An independent technical witness who could show the flaw was structural, long-standing, and concealed below the executive level. The only outside person who'd handled the actual units and had the engineering background to speak to the failure pattern was a repair shop owner in Larkspur Hollow named Daniel Farrow. Vivian drove herself out the next morning, hadn't driven herself anywhere in years. Daniel was under a truck when the car pulled in. He heard the door, then the deliberate click of dressed shoes on concrete, not the uncertain step of someone unfamiliar with a garage. "Daniel Farrow," she said. "Not a question. I know who you are," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, not offering his. 11 years I've been getting your company's broken parts. Nobody's ever said it out loud before." She told him what she needed. He listened without interrupting, then asked what she was offering. She named a figure. He looked out toward the lot where Renee was walking Milo in slow circles, gears tucked under one arm. "That's not what I need," he said. "Then what?" "I need you to sit down and go through 11 years of records with me. And when you're done, I need you to tell me honestly whether you actually knew." On the fourth day, she asked quietly if he'd ever thought about coming forward sooner. "When Milo was 3, I had about $300 saved in a box of records I'd have needed a law firm to present properly," Daniel said. "Ainsley had an entire legal department. I did the math." He wasn't asking for sympathy. He was stating a fact. "That's the thing about a system like the one your company ran," he added. "Nobody has to threaten you directly. They just make the alternative impossible, and then they wait." Ainsley struck back within the week. An anonymous item ran suggesting Daniel's testimony was compromised by years of undocumented cash payments. It was thin, but it circulated. 2 customers canceled appointments by 10 a.m. Vivian arrived and told him what Ainsley's team had actually dug up. A gap in Daniel's 2019 taxes, not fraud. Just a man who couldn't afford a careful accountant during the worst year of his life, but easy to frame as worse. "If you need a different witness, I understand," Daniel told her. She was quiet a moment. "He's doing this because he's afraid of you," she said. "A man with 40 lawyers doesn't dig through a mechanic's tax returns unless he's worried." It was Renee who found it, at nearly midnight, going through the 2017 folders, a standard delivery receipt with a handwritten note stapled behind it, on Meridian letterhead, in Ainsley's own hand. "Handle this. Do not log it in the system." The batch code on that receipt matched a unit involved in a 2021 accident. A man named Curtis Boone, 38, 2 kids, had been operating equipment with that pump housing when it failed under load. He'd survived. He hadn't walked the same since. The federal hearing was held on a Thursday. Daniel came in pressed khakis, no suit, and told the story from the beginning, chronologically, the way he kept his own maintenance logs, the original design work, the report, the restructuring, the first delivery, 11 years of documentation, the note from 2017. Asked why he'd kept such thorough records for over a decade, he paused before answering. "Because I was an engineer there once. Engineers don't throw away data." Ainsley's own testimony, for attorneys and a lengthy prepared statement notwithstanding, began contradicting itself under questioning within 2 hours. The gaps in his record-keeping set against the completeness of Daniel's told a story no statement could revise. 3 weeks later, Preston Ainsley was referred for criminal prosecution on evidence concealment and safety cover-up charges. Vivian Castellane was formally cleared as a primary subject. The federal report cited Daniel Farrow as the source of the independent documentation without which the full scope of the concealment could never have been established. Work at the shop went back to steady. New customers came in, having read the story and figured a man like that probably wouldn't overcharge them, which was accurate. Renee taped a sheet to the front of the cabinets. Complete, 2013 to 2024, in a marker that almost matched the gray-blue paint, which pleased her enormously. "I can't give you back 11 years, she said. "I can give you back your name." He folded the document along its crease and put it in his shirt pocket, quiet for a moment in a way that wasn't uncomfortable, the quiet of something finally being set down after a long time carrying it. "Did you learn anything from all this?" he asked. She thought about it seriously, the way she'd learned to take those cabinet folders seriously. That the people who say the least are usually the ones holding the most. Milo came running from the lot where he'd been drawing with chalk, hit Daniel around the waist, then looked up at Vivian. "You're leaving today?" "I am," she said, crouching to his height, something she couldn't have done easily a month earlier. "But I'll remember this place." Milo considered this with real gravity. "Remember it right, though? This is where my dad fixes things. It's not where people drop off broken stuff and forget about it." Vivian looked at him, then at Daniel, then back. I know, she said quietly. I know the difference now. Daniel walked her to the car. She shook his hand, not a deal being sealed, just one person acknowledging another, and drove east, back toward the tower and the long work of repairing things that had stayed broken far too long. For 11 years, Vivian Castellane's company had used the back lot of Faro Machine and Repair as a place to set down what it didn't want to carry. What she'd never understood, until now, was that Daniel Faro had picked up every single piece of it. Not because he had to, not because it benefited him, but because he was the kind of man who never walked past something broken without noting exactly where the damage was, and whether it might someday help someone find the truth. He'd been right that it would matter. He'd just never known how much patience someday would ask of him.